Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Tanvi, and I'm a senior at Foothill High School. First off, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be a part of today's Fireside Chat. So I'll just start off with a little bit about myself. I've grown up in the Bay Area, and I've always had an interest in numbers and a knack for analyzing things. For a long time, I was into finance, and I wanted to create portfolios for businesses. So recently, I was looking into data science, and I love how versatile the field is and how it can be applied in almost any industry. In the future, I'd love to work to drive smart business decisions using data. So today I'm joined by Brad MacDonald, who is the director of Media Studio at the Exploratorium. Brad, thanks for being here today. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, and it's nice to meet you, Tanvi, and have the opportunity to chat with everybody. Where to begin? I have a pretty diverse background as a designer, and my background, well, here at the Exploratorium, I'm the director of the Media Studio, which means I oversee everything from film, video, web development, graphic design, editorial. Let's see, there's more in there. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And we're actually undergoing a whole bunch of initiatives around data and how we share stories around data. My background is in everything from game design, user experience design, product development, and do a lot of work with museums, obviously. But I'm really, really interested in sort of how we tell data stories and sort of how that manifests in all these different ways. What you said, Tanvi, really struck me, that it's just it's very versatile as a field.
Right. Thank you for that. So, my first question for you is how does design in your field of work relate to data science? So, how exactly does what you do have to do with data?
There are many aspects to that. The Exploratorium, for example, has an active laboratory and research facility. So we have quantitative data that we can study, and how do we express the narrative, unearth the stories there of that data and how we share that with visitors. That's one aspect. There's how do we understand our visitors, period. So we are constantly going through this phase of trying to understand sort of who our visitors are, where are they coming from, how do they interact with our exhibits and exhibitions, how do they behave in the space. We have a visitor services team who basically studies this. So there's the reporting of that kind of data. And so there's kind of the hard data. What is the information we have coming in? And then there's kind of like, how do we express that data? Even just like annual reports, how do we communicate to donors the value of their contribution to the museum? How do we communicate what we're doing in our initiatives to the staff? There's so many different ways that data plays into the stories, and we're a science museum. So data is present in almost everything that we're doing in some level. And as a design team, it's our job to design the labels as well as all these other things that tell these stories.
Right. So I feel like that's a very interesting aspect that you brought up about, kind of finding data through customers and like when they come in, what kind of people there are. So how does this like directly help you? So does like looking at the numbers of people, have you ever seen it make a bigger impact in, getting more people to come or?
Sure. And that's sort of it's a great question. There's kind of ongoing studies, particularly given the pandemic. Visitorship dropped significantly during the pandemic. And so we're now starting to study sort of how people are returning to the museum. So, and just like the most sort of fundamental level, like, do we have the frontline staffing to support our increase or the uptick in visitors to the museum? So it helps inform those decisions. It informs, everything about support staffing, how many days open can we be open, all kinds of things. It's sort of foundational to a lot of the decisions we're making on just either like a daily or even weekly level.
Right. Yeah, so I thought that was actually really cool. So another thing I wanted to ask is, um, what does an average day look like for you? So what kind of projects do you handle? Do you have a project that specifically stands out to you that you remember?
Um, Within the Exploratorium, I have started a kind of a data visualization project of my own that the museum has a pretty rich history.
Hmm.
And I wanted to better understand that. And there are a lot of different resources out there around, within the organization. You know, jump on Google, type in the Exploratorium, there's tons of information, almost too much. And so a project I started was a timeline of the history and the relevant points in our history that I make up who we are as an organization. And so I started modeling just in Google Sheets a timeline of sort of like what are the key moments in our history in terms of the content we're creating, the partnerships that we are developing, the grants that we've developed, pivotal moments in terms of artist engagements that we've had, and all these things. And that visualization, even just in a spreadsheet, ended up how I was able to plot different arcs in our history as an organization and kind of even start to anticipate where we are in either a peak or valley relative to the entire history. And it was a simple exercise, but I learned a ton from that. Another project that I'm doing right now is we've just started it, is trying to figure out, we have all these different streams of data from different departments.
Hmm.
Our development team, our educator team, our public programs team, the media studio team, and we all value different kinds of data. And how to kind of normalize that data into a dashboard that can be shared with teams and across teams. So we kind of know what we're all kind of working on at the same time.
Yeah.
What are our various measurements for success? And how do we as an organization understand these data points and make decisions around them? So
All
that's
right.
another kind of project I've been working on.
Yeah, so that sounds really cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's sorry, I forgot the day thing. My day is I show
yeah.
up, I do my email, I'm in a flood of meetings, and then in the afternoon I get to do projects like these things, these two that I just described.
That's really nice. So it's kind of like a little time for you to relax, but you're still in the zone, technically.
Yeah, I'm mostly in the zone with minimal time to relax, but yes.
Okay. Right. So what made you interested in data science and what was your path to getting where you are today?
Hmm. I had a pretty, I would say, atypical path. I began my career as a political cartoonist
Hmm.
and worked in comic books and became an animator. That kind of led me to graphic design, ran a studio in New York doing graphic design, and early days of web development, started really getting into user interaction design. And that became kind of the bulk of my career. User interaction design as it related primarily to video games. And where I was an art director on video games for 14, 15 years. And I got interested in data through video games. How do we understand what players are doing? Because video games are data-rich environments.
Right.
And so we started creating, kind of with some rigor, the hooks in the video game experiences where we could understand what actual users were doing, as separate from what they were expressing their needs were. And very often what we discovered is what people said they wanted did not play out in terms of the data. And so it like facilitated all these interesting conversations around game design and how do you serve the needs of an audience when they're saying one thing and the data is saying another thing. And how do you create design strategies around that? And that led me ultimately to getting a master's in data visualization from Parsons, where I was also a professor. And I thought that greater facility and understanding about how data is used would only help me. It would be just a great benefit from the user experience perspective. Because I use data, but I primarily see myself as a user experience designer.
Mm-hmm. So are most types of jobs in data science like related to user experience, or are they a lot of analyzing? So what do you think it's mostly centered in?
That is a great question. The thing that's making me pause is the word most.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you're more focused in uh, users and how they think. So is that how generally most fields work, or most industries? Is that how they work around data science? Um,
I
yeah.
think a lot of data science is just like is through you could say, who is my end audience?
Mhm.
Who will take action on the data as presented? Who is this data important to? What kind of behaviors are you trying to influence through the expression of that data? So there is always an end user, but I think the end user might vary wildly across industries or the kind of data collection that you're doing.
Mhm.
Um, a, a researcher who is, say, like within a science team here, they might be conducting research that will be inform sort of a thread of continued research, or they're going to publish a paper. Their audience might be different, say, than the data that I'm collecting to better refine comprehension of a label for an exhibit.
Mhm.
And I think, again, going back to your initial point, there's so many different expressions and applications of data, the understanding of data, that if I were to, I think, give somebody advice, I would say, like, what are you most interested in? And where's the data aspect of that field or that domain?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's why I kind of mentioned it was what I was sort of looking into, since it's a very versatile field.
Yeah.
So what advice would you have to people who are kind of looking into studying data science, or going into the field?
Mm. Um, Formal study would help. It's a hard field, I think, to get into sort of like through informal learning, like just going out and Googling
Hmm.
for classes. I think you could certainly do it, but I've found, at least for my pattern as a learner, having formal instruction, just I was able to take in so much faster. And data science, technology in general is sort of like changing with such rapidity.
Hmm.
Like how we use technology changes from like week to week. And I think having formal instruction like, compresses the education time so you can put theory into action faster rather than trying to self-study.
Hmm.
But learning is learning. Whatever you have the means to do, do it. But I think having formal instruction and application, like I'm really, really into application of theory.
Right.
So conduct a study. What do you want to learn about your neighborhood? What do you want to learn about anything that is personal to you? And try and figure out where does that data, where would you get data from that? Whatever is of interest to you. How do you tell that story? How do you clean up that data? How do you share it with people? I think that's like just developing the practice of it is, I think, sort of how I would recommend people just develop that habit and the routine. And I think depending on the kind of data you're interested in, obviously like programming skills, understanding how is data used, how is it shared, how is data normalized across platforms, how is it cleaned up. So, and basic programming skills. You don't even, I'm not a great programmer.
Hmm.
I know just enough to get myself in trouble, but I also know just enough that I can have conversations about the process, how I can actually do some data collection, aggregation, and cleaning up on my own. So I think having fluency in terms of the process, basic programming skills is kind of essential.
Right. Yeah, so I remember you mentioned about how because of COVID, you've seen, a decline in a lot of people at the Exploratorium.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering how, using data, were you able to, kind of increase the number, or do you still see a decline?
We've seen a significant uptick in visitorship.
Mhm.
which is fantastic. It's great to see people out and about and engaging with the museum. We're starting to even think about. We have an ongoing project here at the Exploratorium that is about considering the visitor experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing place, but we can't just assume that it's an amazing place all the time. So we have to kind of go through the practice of self-reflection and study of our visitors to see, like, we have as the people working at the Exploratorium, a concept of what the museum experience is like that is probably different from visitors. And so we have to conduct studies to better understand their actual needs, their actual desires, their actual points of confusion or inspiration and delight. And the more we can kind of quantify, observe, and understand where they're having great experiences, the more we can leverage that. The more we can identify pain points in their experience, the more we can try to solve problems around that. I had a meeting just this morning about understanding sort of the onboarding of visitors into the museum. And we're starting to kind of collect data around where are those pain points? And from the definition of them, how do we solve those problems?
Mm-hmm. So this would seem kind of like a very basic question, but I was just curious as to, you mentioned about collecting the data, right, from the people that come into the Exploratorium, but how exactly do you do that? So like, where do you get it from? Do you have surveys? Do you, observe?
It's a great question. There's multiple pathways.
Mm-hmm.
So say from the website,
Okay.
we can understand how many people are coming to the Visit Us page. We can track the data, like how many people are visiting that page, how much time did they spend on that page, like what kind of content are they accessing within that page? Are they dropping off before they get to like what we think is key information or not? So we actually get some hard data from the observations of like how people use the website. But then we also conduct a lot of surveys on the floor, asking people, kind of qualitative data analysis. What was your experience like? What was the best part of your experience? What was the most challenging part of your experience? We do exit surveys, and very often it ends up being an overlay of kind of these sort of like qualitative studies and quantitative studies. And between the overlay, you can start to really develop a picture.
Right. Yeah. So I've actually been to the Exploratorium quite a few times, since it's right here. So I also noticed that there's a lot of things that keep changing in the Exploratorium, and that's what I found interesting when I saw that you worked there. So I think we have some time left over for questions. If anyone has those, we can go through,
Looks like
the
there's
chat.
some action in the chat.
Yeah, so we do have a question. When, and I'm not sure if this is for you, but
sounds like maybe it is. I'll field it anyway, Derek. The question is, when and how did you get your programming skills? Before the master's in data visualization or during? Little of both. I had basic skills, HTML, CSS, just from doing game design and web development. But then when I actually got my master's, that's when I started getting into JavaScript, understanding, back-end databases, how they operate, how to set them up, and things like that. So my deeper dive into programming happened during the master's degree. But post that, I've kind of continued the practice of developing like JavaScript. A lot of the work that I do ends up using JavaScript because I'm also really into this sort of like generative art production and a lot of those tools like p5.js and processing. There are a lot of all sort of JavaScript derivative. So I spend a lot of time with JavaScript.
Right, thank you for that. I don't think there are any more at the moment, but you guys can keep adding any questions if you like.
Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah. So as of now, I don't exactly have any more direct questions for you, but I kind of wanted to ask something a little more personal as to my experience with data science. Oh, we do have a question. So how do you recommend kids gain skills in graphic design?
Ooh, that's great. There's kind of like a suite of skills. For a long time, it was kind of like graphic designers are using the Adobe suite, Photoshop and Illustrator, and it didn't really veer that much outside of that in InDesign. But now there's all these other kinds of tools like Figma and Sketch that are used for interaction design. And I think for somebody who is interested in graphic design, I would recommend, there's tons of just sort of YouTube, like practices on typography, color, composition, the fundamentals of just art, really. But then really kind of how I developed as a graphic designer, I studied graphic design as my undergrad. But where I really learned how to design was post-undergrad. And I just volunteered for friends. I was designing, CD covers for friends. I was designing t-shirts. I was helping them with their websites. And that's how I kind of actually learned how to apply graphic design principles beyond lesson plans that had been created for me and develop my own sensibility. But I think graphic design is actually just, it's like the path of mastery to anything. Just do it a lot. So I think learning foundation skills and principles and then putting it into practice. If you can volunteer, do your own work, develop your own website, but help friends out if you're, to develop the skills. That's just do the thing that you want to learn. But then the other thing I recommend for many graphic designers is also study user interaction, because many graphic designers kind of do double duty. They're doing sort of like user interface design and user experience design. So understanding how we relate to the interfaces in our lives, our computers, our phones, what have you, being able to put those practices to work is really helpful, and also expands the number of gig opportunities, just practically speaking, that you might encounter. Do designers work with data analysts while designing a product? Yes, very often. Yeah, I think in product development cycles, very often you are conducting user testing. This happens in sort of like physical product design as well as digital product design. It almost never happens that somebody will design the product and release it into the world and it does wonderfully. Every product that we engage with is the result of many iterative cycles of development and often user testing to determine whether the designer's assumptions were accurate in terms of how they anticipated people might interact with the product. So yeah, user testing is another form of data analysis, and that greatly informs product development.
Yeah, so we have another question. Like, how likely is it to get similar insights from same set of data, but analyzed by different people?
That's such a good question. I would say it depends on how far away you are building your assumptions into the data itself. So if the data is telling you, let's say the museum experience. If the data is telling you, let's see, what's a good example? Well, let's say the website. If you're seeing that a certain number of people are not getting measurably, or not getting, like we have this amount of traffic coming to the website, we have this number of people who are actually getting to the Visit Us page, and maybe then from Visit Us actually engaging with the Buy a Ticket button. We could observe what the data tells us, how many people are coming to the site, how many people get to the Visit Us page, and then how many people are getting to the ticketing. And there's not a whole lot of debate over sort of like what the numbers are. The debate happens in sort of like why the numbers are what they are. Like if people are getting to the visit page but not clicking the ticket button, then you start kind of going through the cycle of like, let's redesign that page to see if we can actually prompt more people clicking the ticket button. And that's where you sort of like, because then you'll start doing user testing cycles too. We'll design a page. Maybe you'll do A/B testing. You'll design 2 versions of the page, both designed based on our best guesses of sort of user behavior to get them to click the buy a ticket button page. And then you'll compare that data, which design succeeded more than the other. So I think very often you'll get to the data will tell you something, and then there's the exercise of understanding why that data is the way it is. And there's often debate and follow-up studies that need to happen to determine that.
Yeah, I really thought that question was interesting because you know how you gave the example. I think that was really helpful. Yeah, so I also had a question. It's more vast. So, how easy is it to kind of switch into different industries in data science? So, like as long as you have the knowledge, you know how to analyze. Like, how easy does it become after that to kind of switch into different industries?
I would love to be able to answer this in sort of a universal way.
Mm-hmm.
My hunch is people who have the core skill sets, a strong foundation in programming, collecting data, and sort of the expression of that data. How does it show up? How do you share that data? Could be quite versatile moving across industries.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a pretty, in my path, as I've been like engaging with data, it's been really kind of user focused, visitor focused. And that's allowed me to go from video game design to teaching to product development and ultimately museum design.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been able to hop across some industries, but those industries are all kind of connected in that there's a pretty clear end user, there's a lot of digital interfaces, and the core skill sets really kind of carried over. But they're, in my mind, kind of similar design expressions, and the problem solving is similar.
Okay.
In my background, though, I have seen a lot of the people in the video game industry that we used to hire would come from banking. People with like really, really strong sort of data comprehension and programming skills coming from financial and banking industries ended up kind of making it over to the video game industry because at that point in time, the video game industry realized we need to understand data.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people were able to leap from very, very what you would normally think is divergent industries.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So if anyone has any more questions, we have a couple more minutes left. You guys can ask away.
This is fun.
Yeah. So I think it would be great, if maybe you could share your email if anyone has any other questions, either in the chat or to Amelia. It's up to you.
I can just throw it in the chat. We'll see what happens. This will be an experiment. And it is also, and thank you for that.
All right, yeah, so I think I'll just wrap this up really quick.
And,
2 minutes left. Yeah.
Actually, also, Tanvi, you're in the Bay Area. Like, come by the museum.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Because actually, I've been thinking about within our design department is trying to figure out how to engage with folks in the Bay Area who are interested in data, who are interested in graphic design and user interaction design. We're a resource and we'd love to engage with the community. So if you're in the Bay Area, please reach out.
Of course. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I really enjoyed what you had to say today, and I gained a lot of insight as to how data can be applied. Hopefully a lot of people were inspired by this because I certainly was. So thank you, Brad, for being here today. So yeah, thanks everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of the event.
Thank you, everybody.
All right,
thank you,
thank
Tommy.
you.
It's nice to see everybody saying thank you. Everybody's so nice. All right.
Yeah, I think we just have a minute left. So
We just like watching the
just hang
clock
out.
run. All right. What are you gonna do? What's your next step for data, Tanvi?
Right. So I recently just got into exploring more of it, right? Because I was more interested in finance. So, maybe if I can kind of look into the numbers and data side of finance, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think there is a strong connection between finance and sort of understanding data in organizations like the Exploratorium. We're a complex financial system, and the better we can get at sort of expressing what that data tells us, the more we can make kind of institution level decisions. So I think there's actually like a lot of kind of power in that,
Right.
that specific pairing of your interests.
Yeah.
That's great. Oh, that's fun. I'm getting a text from a friend who's just saying, oh, we need an exploratorium on the East Coast.
Oh,
Hi, Sarah.